When I arrived in Tokyo, my first port of call was a hostel in Shibuya. Now, I knew that there were certain mannerisms and behaviors that I would have to exhibit if I was to remain respectful to the culture. I feel as though I fell at the first hurdle though when I realized that there may actually be no slippers in Japan that fit my feet. Another important thing for you to know is that there is something that will overshadow this entire trip to Tokyo, and that is the fact that I had foot surgery 2 days before I flew out. And I was under strict instructions from the doctor to keep my foot dry. Now it felt quite typical of me that I was 10 minutes into arriving, and in a country where social etiquette is important, I found myself walking down the dorm corridor with a marigold on my foot. I have to say that on my first day, I headed to something which felt familiar, which was a Starbucks. But whilst I was at this Starbucks, I bumped into 2 American people who told me about a place called Akihabara. Akihabara is also known as the Electric City, and it's somewhere that is famous for its anime, electronics and video games, all of which I love. I thought to myself, I can't surely land in Tokyo and on the very first day spend all of my money in the arcades. Or could I? Being the geek that I am, I think Akihabara was probably one of my favorite places in Tokyo. Each street had anime shops and arcades on every corner, and each one was about 5 or 6 floors high. I walked through these neon palaces and spotted Midoriya from My Hero Academia and said instantly, I want that. And only a few thousand yen later, it was mine. Anime and electronics temporarily out of my system, I headed up to one of the biggest Shinto shrines in Tokyo City. Please forgive any mispronunciations, but this shrine or Shinto shrine was the Meiji Jingu shrine. Now I have to be careful what I talk about, because when I'm in these places, it's more the people and the aesthetic that catch my eye. If you want to know more about these Shinto shrines, visit them yourself or find someone that knows much more than I do, which is very little. They were, however, amazing places, and the Japanese care and attention to the maintenance is just second to none. I spent a lot of my time chasing butterflies and looking at the wildlife around me, which is always something that I find myself doing. And there was one interesting bug that caught my eye. As I was walking down this road, dangling directly over the bridge around head height was what I believe to have been a case moth caterpillar. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I spent about 20 minutes filming this little dude and also letting people know that it was there, because I can't escape the thought that it ended up in someone's hair or mouth, and I can only hope that he managed to get back up to the leaf he was dangling from. I think I paid about 500 yen to visit the princess's garden, and it was a wise investment, I think, because it was stunning. Again, well taken care of, luscious, and also full of life. Whilst I was walking through the princess's garden, I noticed an insect that looked like something out of a nightmare. It was landing on the path, doing something and then flying away. So naturally I got down with my camera and I started filming it. And I noticed that it was picking up stones from the path and just flying off with them. I reached the center of the Shinto shrine and washed my hands and my mouth, as was appropriate for entering. I think it's common knowledge that we can be susceptible to illness from exposing ourselves to foreign bugs. So putting the water from the shrine in my mouth, rinsing and spitting, definitely left me with the fear that I might fall unwell. But I didn't. That's the main thing. There was no chance that I was going to ignore those signs, because that would have been very, very disrespectful. But that was just something that crossed my mind in that moment. Now, something happened to me when I went into the shrine. I noticed a place in the center where people could write their prayers and their wishes on a board and then hang them in the hope that they would be answered. Naturally, because of my empathy and my curiosity into the human condition, I saw this as a window into the lives and experiences of others. But I wasn't prepared for some of the cries for help that I was about to see. Some people are really struggling, and I only hope that this person found the support that they deserve. I took the opportunity to use my board to try and support them in some way, but couldn't resist the urge to ask for just another little bonus on top. Towards Harajuku Station, I found the familiar signs of Western capitalization and self-expression. Konnichiwa. Never underestimate the selling power of a Japanese boy band. I have never seen a queue for plain crackers. I was also introduced to capsule culture. If it exists, they have miniaturized it and put it in a capsule. Chocolates, toiletries, these things, even minivans. Naturally, I had to have a go, but if I was going to win a capsule toy, it was going to have to be one of the most iconic Japanese characters of all time. I was 3 days in and it was time to do my laundry. And it was actually something I was quite excited to do. There's just something so cinematic about these places. During the planning of this trip, I reached out to a local street photographer by the name of Aru to see if he would like to be interviewed and contribute to the film. This is a theme I'd like to continue with my work because when it comes to landing in a foreign country or being in a foreign city, street photographers could offer a valuable insight into those places. And also being someone that captures street life himself, I have a natural curiosity as to what motivates and drives these people to do what they do. Fortunately for me, he agreed. He was a little hesitant at first because he thought I might be looking for someone who had a few more thousand followers on Instagram, to which I replied, everyone has a story. Before Aru and I went shooting on our first day, he took me to some camera shops and I was in heaven. Wall-to-wall cameras and lenses of all types. Some of the stores looked like they've been around for decades and the owner still had all the enthusiasm. Aru hit the streets to capture Tokyo life and I hit the streets to capture Aru capturing Tokyo life, and when we were done we settled in a cafe where I could ask him some questions about why he takes pictures and what he thought of Tokyo City.
I'm from Chile like 7.5 years ago, 8 years almost. I think when I am shooting, I split a bit from the world, you know? I don't think so much. It's like we went out from lunch and I saw something, right? And I just fell on that. And it's like, oh, look, this is nice, you know, like, and I really love that of photography. And I think it has been always like that. Like, it's like to look at painting, it's like to watch a movie. You know, like for me, it would work like that. Like when I focus on that, when I arrive to that flow state, there is nothing else. You isolate yourself, you know, like you have a barrier, it protects you. I think it's like a cope mechanism, in my way, for me at least. Tokyo is a place full of contrast. When you come for the first time here, you don't know. You just see the surface. But there is so many levels. Good, bad, sad, happy, you know. So when for example, I'm shooting around in this city in particular, in Shinjuku, I like it because there is a division, you know. You cross one street and then red light district. You cross another street, like people working a lot, you know. Another street, people having fun and chilling, you know. So you can see so many colors in the same place. I am not searching anymore for that typical silhouette of the man walking. I'm focused here, in the eyes mostly. I'm always looking faces, and I try to get that. And then when I do the contact, but it's so difficult to get it, because in Japan there is this culture of like, the people don't show what they are for real. So what I'm looking now, it is that, a little bit of innocence.
Aru and I also visited a smaller, quieter part of Tokyo City, a place called Yanaka, where his photography seemed to shift from people to buildings. And when I asked him about this, he said to me that he felt as though certain parts of Tokyo were disappearing, and with his photography, he wanted to preserve them. And that was something I understood. The next day I left the hotel and headed to a quieter part of Tokyo City called Nippori. I was headed to my first Airbnb of the trip, Mi's place. Now, the thing about Mi's place is that it comes with 4 resident cats. Now, considering some of the motivation for going to Mi's place was to produce a film about what I saw, I thought it was respectful to let her know and ask her if it was okay if I could bring a camera. To which she replied, yes, camera shooting is okay, me. Take a photo of the cats, cat emoji. It was quite fortuitous that whilst I was walking up her very road, I spotted a shop that sold lots of little trinkets, one of which was a cat ornament. So naturally, I thought it would be nice to give her a little gift. Do not ask me what the ornament was, because for some inexplicable reason, I didn't take a single bit of video of it. I think it was a glass with a cat for a handle, perhaps. The other thing is, as long as it's got a cat on it, I don't think that me cares. Me's place was more than just an Airbnb, it was a local shrine for cat owners around the world, I think, to come and bring pictures of their cats, alive or dead perhaps, and place them on this shrine. And it was actually quite clearly a local attraction because a lot of people would stop and take pictures. Inside was exactly what you'd expect. I got inside, dumped my bags, and straight away went up to meet these cats. That night I headed back into the city in the search for some world-class ramen. I was quite conscious of filming in restaurants, so I tried to be as discreet as possible, but here was a slightly out of focus shot of me enjoying maybe the best egg I've ever had. On my way back to Mi's place, I happened across a sign that said karaoke. Now, Tokyo is the karaoke capital of the world, so I didn't want to pass up on the opportunity. The only problem was it was 9 p.m. and there was almost nobody in this bar. But you know what, sometimes in life, you just have to say, F it. Take that look from off your face, 'cause you ain't ever gonna burn my heart out. Are you still with me? Good. You're a fantastic person. I have a pretty terrible sugar addiction and I am a dessert person. So when I spotted honey toast, I knew that I was going to have to try some. The honey toast I had consisted of a loaf of bread which had been hollowed out. The insides had been fried in honey, placed back into the bread, and then they'd put cream all over the top and on the side. I think I got a little bit of a funny look when I went to the restaurant and asked for a honey toast for one, because typically they are for sharing, and I understand why. This thing was absolutely banging. When you consume that amount of sugar, you have to do something with that energy, so I did. After 2 nights at Mise, I set off. I was headed to Mount Fuji. Fuji Kawaguchiko was a really interesting place from my perspective. I think it's too often perhaps that wonderful natural landmarks can be spoiled by tourism and development around tourism, and for the most part I could see that Fuji Kawaguchiko hadn't suffered any of that. I haven't seen many mountains, but I have to say that Fuji is striking. I spent the evening gathering what I thought would be necessary supplies that consisted mostly of donuts and hydration sachets, and got a good night's sleep. I arose to one of the most tranquil mornings I'd ever seen, and I prepared for the day by placing the items I wasn't taking up the mountain in a locker. I paid an astonishing 85 English pounds for a 15 to 20 minute taxi ride to get me to the start of the mountain. When I arrived at the start of the Yoshida Trail, I think it's fair to say that things didn't go quite to plan.
So I just had what was initially a terrifying conversation with a guide that's told me that the mountain is closed because it is the end of climbing season, and no one is going to the summit.
So now it's a climbing season is anyway so closed.
I honestly can't describe how I felt after hearing that. I didn't really know what to think. I was like, well, I've come halfway around the world and this is it, you know. I looked up online, and apparently you can climb the mountain out of season. I'll come across signs that say the mountain is closed, but that is just a way of warning all the climbers that they are undertaking this at their own risk. The weather can get adverse in the winter season and in the off season, but that was only 2 days ago, so I'm feeling confident that it's not going to be that bad. There is one problem though, and that is that I am in the wrong place, so I'm going to have to change my summit time. I'm going to have to get climbing now to get there for maybe sunset and then climb down during the night.
I was essentially on the wrong side of the mountain. The place I was due to stay that night was on the Subashiri Trail, which is on the other side of the mountain. I could have taken an expensive taxi down and gone round to the next town, but I decided that perhaps I could try and summit on the Yoshida Trail and then descend that evening down to my hut on the Subashiri Trail. It was quite a funny moment when I was having a discussion with the mountain guides in which I heard someone over my left shoulder exclaim,
追っていくよっていうのは現実的じゃないですよね。
Once I'd overcome the initial shock of hearing that the mountain was closed, I started my climb. As I started the ascend and witnessed the closing of the stations in real time, I really got the sense that I was alone on this mountain.
This climb has really taken me by surprise. There's parts to it that are a real steep, rocky scramble. This is absolutely grueling. Every 10 meters feels like 10 miles. I will get there. This is tough. So here is where it ends for me. The 9th station, 3,600 meters. This mountain has absolutely humbled me.
I have spent most of my life at sea level, and trying to summit Mount Fuji in one day was just too much for my body. As I approached the 9th station, altitude sickness had set in. I was nauseous, I had a headache, I was struggling to breathe at times, and my legs just weren't working anymore. I got to the 9th station and I could see the 10th station, which was essentially the summit, and decided that the smart thing to do was to go down. That nauseating descent to the mountain hut was maybe one of the hardest things I've ever done. And there was a certain sense of urgency around it because I knew that the hut closed at 8 p.m. When I awoke the next day, I really didn't think that I was going to attempt a summit. I enjoyed the most incredible sunrise, and despite a nosebleed, I felt somewhat elated that I didn't feel nauseous and I didn't have a headache. And I thought to myself, these opportunities don't come around very often. I've traveled halfway around the world to get here. If I take my time, stop at the stations and rest, and have one last push, it's possible that I might be able to summit this mountain. So I threw my Tivas in my backpack, strapped on my Solomons, and I went for it. I took my time, I focused on my breathing, my inhale and my exhale, and I subsequently cruised past places that I was crawling the day before. On my way up, I gained a climbing partner in the form of a young lad named Rex, who was visiting from Australia, and I think our conversations really helped to make the climb much easier. At times it felt almost impossible that I could feel as good as I do on the second attempt, but sure enough, we pushed past Station 9, and there in front of me were the welcoming gates to the summit. You know, it would be very easy for me to turn this story about me and Mount Fuji into a lesson for people. Pitfalls to avoid, checklists to make, maps to check. But if you were to ask me, you have two choices. One, you can climb the mountain again, and everything can go smoothly and to plan, and you can be up and down without any troubles. Or two, you can do it the way that you did it. When you think about climbing a mountain, it's very easy to just focus on going up. But I'll tell you now, Mount Fuji's descent was exhausting in a very different way. 4 hours of switchbacks and gravel and skidding, which left me exhausted by the time we reached the base. When I got back down to the start of the Yoshida Trail, I was given a lift by Rex and his family back to Fuji Kawaguchiko, which was an absolute blessing. It was pissing with rain, and I had no idea how I was going to get back otherwise. The next day, I boarded a bus in Fuji Kawaguchiko and headed back into Tokyo City, feeling pretty accomplished. Tokyo City was an experience for me like no other. I've said this before, I'll say it again, there is nothing that I can say will do a city with 14 million people justice. Although I was exhausted, 2 weeks in Tokyo for me just was not enough. It was built on a bedrock of something that would take me a lifetime to understand. I became self-conscious, it brought out my insecurities, it tested my self-awareness, but all the while proved that I do want to be respectful for the world and the lives of other people. I hope that this little video has entertained or inspired you guys in some way. If it has, don't forget to like and subscribe. The last thing I want to say is thank you to the people of Tokyo for showing me who they are and for also showing me sides to myself. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate you.